Hello, and welcome to How a Major California Dairy Cooperative Protects Microsoft 365 Data with Veeam. Today's webinar is sponsored by Veeam and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. That major cooperative in the title is California Dairies, Inc., which is the largest farmer-owned milk processing cooperative in California, and this massive operation is relied on Veeam at key junctures to prevent emergencies ranging from exchange data loss to problems with a custom system that handles farmer payments. So in addition to an expert from Veeam, we'll be hearing from California Dairy's Director of Infrastructure and Security on how he uses Veeam. It's going to be a great conversation. Before we get to that discussion, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box of our webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. A Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio or video or slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. There's a link to learn more about Veeam. There's an offer to save 15% on Veeam backup for Microsoft 365. And there's a case study reference if you want to learn more about the specific deployment that we'll be talking about today. Also in there are a link to the Gorilla Guide Book Club where you can get access to Actual Tech Media's great printed resources, as well as a link to the ATM Events Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events. So I encourage you to access those resources now and share them with your friends and colleagues. Third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $300 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section as well. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the terms and conditions link there. Finally, one of the best benefits of this event is that opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. So to help encourage your questions, to get your fingers flowing, we have a few special additional prizes, or one special additional prize for you, and that's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. At the end of the event, we'll look back through all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. So with that, let's get to today's fantastic discussion. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters today. We have Louis Tsai, who's Senior Systems Engineer at Veeam, and we have Matthew Prieto, who's Director of Infrastructure and Security for California Dairies, Inc. So Louis, Matthew, great to have you both here.
Great to be here, Scott.
Thank you, Scott. Great introduction. Glad to be here talking to everybody regarding Veeam, and specifically Matthew from California Dairies. Thank you for being on. Just a couple quick intros, I guess. Matthew, do you want to give? I know, Scott gave a great intro of yourself. Do you want to give us more detailed information about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Just some additional housekeeping. In case you do happen to hear some stampeding cattle or roosters in the background, perfectly normal. It's part of farm life and what we deal with every day here. But I am the Director of Infrastructure and Security for California Dairies. I have been here working for roughly a little over 16 years. We started from 6 physical servers somewhere in a closet to what we have now, hundreds and hundreds of VMs, all managed by Veeam. So I manage a team that handles all the functionality, security, accessibility, and integration for California Dairies. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'll be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Great. Thank you, Matthew, for the heads up on the roosters and the cattle in the background. Hopefully we get to hear some of that, since I'm sure a majority of us that live in the city life don't get to actually witness, farm life, and looking forward to hearing the roosters in the background like I did earlier today. So quick intro on myself. My name is Louis Tsai. I have been with Veeam for 4.5 going on 5 years. Prior to that, I sat in your seat as a customer, various industries, sports, entertainment, legal, finance. I've done it all. And ever since leaving the customer side, I've been with Veeam. That's 5 years, going on 5 years, and looking forward to what the future of Veeam has to offer, right? So yeah, let's start a conversation. So Matthew, you gave us a quick rundown of what your role is at California Dairies. I mean, when we're first talking about backup and data protection, is a reason why you're looking for it, right? At the end of the day, who wants to
Absolutely.
talk to somebody and be like, I don't have backups of your data. So, what's one of the challenges you had at California Dairies before you actually became a Veeam customer for Veeam back from Microsoft 365 specifically?
Yeah, so I mean, we were kind of late into the game when it regards to clouds, into cloud integration for Office 365 or data for SharePoint. We had a lot of things on-prem. We had Exchange on-prem, SharePoint, and we knew that eventually we had to go into the cloud of some way, shape, or form. We still are a hybrid solution where we kind of are mix and match of users, but most of our users are now happily integrated with the cloud. And one of the biggest issues we run into is, what do we do once they're there with the data? I mean, for 20 plus years that I've been working with technology, it has all been very siloed. And here's your data, here's your backup. But now everything is in the cloud. It could be stored somewhere on a server on the East Coast. What do you do with it? So I came from LTO4 days, iOmega zip drives, worked previously to a backup company. So I'm very familiar with the backup process, grandfather, father, son. And how do you work around capacity? How do you work around bandwidth? You have all this data that you're just throwing into the cloud, and how do you retain it? What are your retention policies? How are you going to back it up on a daily basis, hourly basis, continuously? So those are some of the early kind of workarounds we needed to figure out within our department to figure out how we go from physical to virtual, and then from virtual to cloud. So it's a process, and so far we're really enjoying it.
I'm glad you're enjoying it, and that's part of the scope of the biggest pain that we all have. Everyone's like taking pictures on their iPhones. They think it's fictitiously stored somewhere in the cloud, and it's fully protected. And we'll go through that shared responsibility model in the quick PowerPoint slide deck. But I'm glad you mentioned the whole history of LTO4 drives, right, or tapes, and the old school iOmega Jazz drives that was green, right? We all had that growing up. Protecting our own home workload.
We would never need more than 100 megs. I don't know why we have anything larger. So
what did Bill Gates say back in 1991 or so? 16 megs, that's all you ever need. Yeah, not anymore.
Yeah,
right?
512 cache in the processor, that's all you need.
Exactly. And thank you for giving us a brief history on the deployment that's there. It leads me to question, you're talking about data sprawl. And, what does your deployment and architecture look like now? I mean, where are you putting that data, the M365 data that Veeam's backing up?
So one of the issues and obviously, anytime you make a change from your core kind of backup solution, there's always a process of thinking, where are we going to? How are we going to get there? What's it like if something drastically happened? What happens if something minor happens? You have to take all these things into consideration. And so one thing that we didn't want to do is, now that we're moving everything to the cloud, we didn't want to bring everything back on-prem to restore. I mean, okay, we're throwing terabytes and terabytes, almost petabytes of data into the cloud. I don't want to pull that down. I mean, not only do I not necessarily have the bandwidth, do I have the time throughout the day? Do I have the capacity on-prem to do that? So what we ended up doing was, with the Microsoft 365, the version 6 that we're running now allows us to do almost an east to west backup. So we implemented Wasabi Backup, which is a possible solution within Veeam, object storage, and we actually transferred directly from Microsoft 365 directly to Wasabi. We have an on-prem VM that runs and facilitates that backup, but we point essentially to, here's our tenant within Microsoft 365, here is Wasabi, and here's the amount of terabytes of data that we have. Back it all up, and it backs up Exchange, it backs up emails, OneDrive, SharePoint, OneDrive, essentially the same thing, just different front ends. And so everything is backed up directly from M365 to Wasabi. It never hits our premise, so we don't have to worry about having to keep that capacity, which is extremely nice.
Yeah, and that's part of Veeam's vision in all our applications, right? Across the spectrum, and there's multitude of applications that we have to protect any of the workloads that you have, whether it's sitting locally on premise or in the cloud like M365. And the beauty of it is that we're software only, and being storage agnostic like Matthew in California Dairy is, they're backing up to Wasabi. If you wanted to back it to AWS, Azure, go ahead, right? If you want to bring the data back on premise, that is perfect, right? You did mention
Yeah,
that. Go ahead.
we did consider AWS and Azure Blob Storage as a potential as well. It was just whatever works for us may not work for everybody else because their situation is going to be a little bit different. But for us, Wasabi worked best for our solution.
Yeah, and that's the key. Is part of that. I'll say it many times during this conversation when my customers say, "You say it too much," but it's the bread and butter of Veeam is software only, storage agnostic, and that storage agnostic piece provides that no vendor lock-in functionality from a Veeam perspective as well as a storage perspective. Don't like a storage provider? Move it somewhere else, right? You're not locked in, and we're not an appliance, and that's the best part about Veeam. We bring that flexibility and scalability to the marketplace to provide California Dairy, as well as any customer that's sitting in the cloud right now that wants to protect their data with Veeam backup from Microsoft 365, put that data wherever you want, right? So
yeah, we came from the Veeam backup and replication where we have an external array that we back up to, and that's even that product, even as it is now, is still hardware agnostic. You just dump it to the array, and so it's extremely functional and flexible to whatever needs you have, especially for us.
Yeah, and not talking futures here, but look up for this winter, a lot of cool stuff coming up with Veeam. Specifically, we'll talk about the next versions, what's maybe coming out, but we'll get to that at a later time. So you did mention you're currently on version 6. What version did you start implementing Veeam back from Microsoft 365 with?
So we first began to looking at Microsoft 365 for Veeam with version 5. And how version 5, and we knew version 6 was kind of in the crust because version 5 had been out for a while. We didn't want to be on a cutting edge of everything. We didn't be on the bleeding edge of technology. So we let everybody else work on, cutting their teeth on it. So we finally implemented M365 backup with version 6. That was our first full-blown implementation. We did a POC with version 5. A lot of it had to do with bringing the data back on-prem or storing it locally. But once version 6 came out, we knew it was kind of a game changer for us because we didn't have to buy that giant array and have it sit in our data center or sit in our colo or sit in a remote location. That allowed us to find somewhere that's, like you said, hardware agnostic, move the data off-prem, and so we don't have to worry about it filling up our capacity for array or buying another $40,000 array with 100 terabytes just because we need 7 or 10 years retention. So we started with 6, and I think we're now on 6.1, which offers some really cool functionality, which we love playing with.
I'm glad you love playing with it, and I think you've been a long time Veeam customer as well for Veeam backup application, right? So Veeam's been true tried on your infrastructure. Like a lot of our customers have, and they're slowly making that leap into, should we protect our M365 data? And I guess, great question for you, if you can answer it, is, was it hard to make that leap to say, hey, we've taken our email and we've stored it in Microsoft 365, right? Do we really need to back it up? And was it hard to have managers or your upper level management to buy into that process to say, hey, our data is actually not being protected in M365?
Yeah, so that kind of responsibility role between who's responsible for your retention, who's responsible for your backup. When everything's on-prem, you're solely responsible for everything: accessibility, flexibility, retention, encryption, whether it be in transit or as it sits. You're responsible for everything. And so when you move to the cloud, and like we did, the slow progression of how we moved, you need to understand, and we needed to understand, it was a whole new world for us. And who's responsible for retention? Who's responsible for backup? And that whole shared responsibility model that Microsoft has and Veeam have and we have has different components to it. We know we're responsible for backup. We're responsible to make sure that our data is accessible. Microsoft, they're going to be putting their stuff in West Coast 2, West Coast 3, East Coast, Central. They're going to keep it basically across the country accessible to you, regardless of where you are as a customer. But it doesn't prevent that rogue user you have who decided, I'm going to delete 30 terabytes of data because I have access to it. And guess what? That 30 terabytes gets deleted across all of the facilities. And so it's our responsibility to make sure we back it up. We back it up for the proper retention. We back it up for however long we need, not just for OneDrive and SharePoint, but also for email. And everybody's different, and each industry is different. We have our own little policies, internal and policies that we need to rely upon. And so we knew there's a separation. In moving to the cloud, you have to learn those. Don't learn the hard way. I mean, you definitely don't want to learn the hard way. So just, when you move, be aware that you're responsible for a lot of it. And there's a lot of articles out there on the web you can go search. But for us, we knew that using Veeam, we used it for so long. M365 backup allowed us to facilitate that type of backup and retention that we were looking for as what I guess you call them a client from Microsoft 365.
And you brought up a good point. We'll cover the share responsibility model as part of the quick presentation we're going to have. But we're talking about data protection, right? And when we're assuming that our customers are aware of what Microsoft actually protects. And you brought up a good point. A bad actor comes in and deletes mailboxes, and that's happened. There's actually an article that came out.
Oh yeah, no,
a year ago. Yeah, go ahead.
We don't necessarily. We still do worry about the giant disasters of an entire data center going out, or that a bulldozer comes over and trenches up all of our fiber in one of the locations, which happened about 16 months ago. That stuff you plan for. The one things that we deal with in an IT department on a daily basis is a user calls up and says, I deleted a file, or that file is now corrupted, or I overwrote it. And there's multiple ways to facilitate that, or that one user who's just fed up with their job because they didn't get the raise they wanted or the promotion goes through and just deletes everything and walks out the door. Those are things that are a little more common than having, a building blow up or one of our plants, dryers catch on fire.
Correct.
But that's the kind of stuff you got to worry about as well.
And everyone thinks, so these scenarios we're talking about, they're not real world scenarios, but this actually did happen to a company in San Diego about a year and a half, 2 years ago. It was a contractor that was being let go, and he actually deleted all the mailboxes. They actually ended up arresting him a year and a half later. The FBI got him in Dulles and back in Washington, D.C. when he went to visit his brother, right? Long story short, data protection is data protection and also covers disasters just like that and as a bad actor coming in. But we also want to separate data protection because data protection is not replication. Once again, bad actor comes in and deletes that mailbox. Yeah, it's protected as replicated. Yeah, that replication's done that delete replication across the entire geo within M365. You don't have that data back. And I think that's the point you were trying to make is it's not really protected.
Right.
So, last question I'd probably ask you is, there's a lot of cool functionality with Veeam. Veeam back replication, Veeam back with AWS, Azure, GCP, all our product sets. M365, what is your favorite feature set of Veeam backup from Microsoft 365?
Yeah, so there's so many because, the whole functionality of M365 allows so many doors to be open just for having the users accessible to the cloud. They can work remotely, and especially in today's day and age, how everything turned on a dime. But for me, for the game changer for us in the department was this kind of the SelfService Restore portal, because it allowed the IT department to not focus on that user who deleted that OneDrive file who's on their desktop. So just to give you some background on how we manage, we redirect everybody's desktop documents and their pictures folders essentially to OneDrive. So when a user logs in, anything they they save their desktop or they save their documents automatically gets synced up with OneDrive. And when they call up or they create a help desk ticket because they deleted that file or they accidentally overwrote it and Control Z is not working and they're not able to figure out how exactly they can get that file back, instead of them waiting for that ticket to be assigned to a restoration user or a restoration agent and go through the process of, okay, show me the file name and where's the file located? Okay, now let me gain access to your particular restoration and back it up through Veeam, or even other methods, whether it be through versioning. The user, the self-serving portal, can go to that portal within Veeam, Microsoft 365 backup, And here's the file that I need. Here it is, restore it. And it does everything for them. They don't have to involve IT. And so we're not, kind of bombarded with those type of, questions. And with thousands of users that we deal with, it could be very, very cumbersome at times. And if we need to restore major subsets, then yes, obviously that's what we do. But those one particular file restores, completely self-service portal for the users, game changer for us. It allows us a little more efficiency within the department because we can actually kind of, what does Microsoft call it? Stay within the flow of things. I mean, we don't have to worry about, I mean, you never know. I mean, sometimes you're just extremely busy and the last thing you need to do is restore someone's Excel document because they overwrote it.
Yeah.
But now we don't have to worry about that. We just have to train the users and create a solution on the portal within our help desk to walk the user through how they can do it themselves and make them more self-reliant. That's important, is us to make the users more self-reliant so they're not so dependent. Everything's going to work. Promise. We're going to do our best to make sure everything works. But if something does happen, you can take care of yourself.
Exactly. And
for us,
that's
that was a great feature for us. Absolutely was.
And and let's just talk about development of Veeam, right? And we'll have a slide on this in terms of where our development cycles have been. And I think a majority of what we develop and how we develop is based off of our customers, like you. It's been a huge feature request of our customers. Hey, we want self-service portals. We want our end users to restore their own M365 data, right? In fact, we've had that functionality, role-based access controls built into Veeam back replication for years. And it's because customers like you that have used Enterprise Manager with that same role-based access control functionality within VBR, they wanted that same functionality within Veeam Backup from Microsoft 365. And that's what was the latest release, right? So I'm glad you really enjoyed it.
Oh, we absolutely do. I mean, we knew the functionality was there through Veeam replication, or backup replication with the Explorer, and bringing it to Microsoft 365, whether they're, in Kentucky, Texas, India, wherever, they can. Whoops, I deleted something. Oh, okay, go get it. So yeah, it's a game changer for us. It absolutely is.
It is. I'm very happy that it's been able to make your life a lot easier. And with that said, thank you for the quick interview. Matthew's going to be here giving some color commentary and throwing his 2 cents in, and hopefully we get to hear the roosters in the back end sometime. But yeah, let's move on. They're out. Hopefully they'll come flying behind.
It doesn't matter if it's 6 in the morning or the sun is rising. They decide to roost whenever they feel like it. So it could be 2 in the afternoon.
At the end of the day, they're wild animals. So hopefully they don't cause any trouble.
So Matthew, I will be here if you have any questions, and absolutely, if anybody has, I'll be online as well.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, let's get on with it, right? So once again, I'm Louis High, Veeam Senior SC. I don't think I gave my location before. I'm actually born and raised in Boston. Spent 8 years in New York City, then trekked cross coast to where I live now, which is in Southern California. I cover a territory which is fairly large, which spans the East Bay of California, which is Northern California, down all the way to LA and all of Nevada. There are many of myself out there as Veeam SCs nationwide as well as global. So I'm not your only resource. However, if you want to use me as a pivot point, please, by all means do so. I'll get you to the right resource, right? So let's just start with the scariest slide out there possible, because I love scaring people. 55% of businesses are left unprotected. These are the businesses that are like, hey, it's in the cloud. It's not my worry. I put it in the cloud for a reason, and I don't want to worry about it, right? And 55% left unprotected, you're leaving malicious insiders to do something really bad, right? Or even accidental deletions. And we'll cover all that, right? But more importantly, let's talk about what the industry leaders or research firms are agreeing upon, right? That realistically, all three of these are saying software as a service is not protecting your data. If you're not protecting your data, you should be, right? And we're definitely pointing you towards Veeam Backup from Microsoft 365 because we are the leader in data protection within Microsoft 365. So, the next question is usually like, why do we need to back it up? Well, we'll give you 7 perfect reasons. One, we've mentioned a couple of them already: accidental deletions, retention policy / confusion gaps. And this is a big one, mainly because, and we'll cover this again, Employee leaves the company, you assume that that's being protected, right? Microsoft deletes it after a while. Internal security threats, malicious insiders, departing employees, we spoke about this, maliciously deleting mailboxes, or even maliciously deleting emails. Let's just say you have someone that did something really bad and decided to delete their email, so it wouldn't show up as e-discovery when they go look for it. Guess what? Veeams backed it up and will actually do e-discovery based off the backup set, right? So they delete it, it still can be found. Next, external security threats, ransomware, rogue apps. Believe it or not, Kevin Mitnick. Who's heard of Kevin Mitnick? Me. He's a social hacker now. He actually hacked the FBI way back when. There's the YouTube video out there that actually shows him live encrypting a Microsoft 365 Exchange mailbox. It actually scrolls through and shows the encryption process happening, right? And you guys could probably guess what happens when it's finished encrypting. It sends you an email and asks you for Bitcoin. Granted, now Bitcoin's more affordable than what it was about a year and a half ago, but it's still Bitcoin that you have to pay for because it's ransomware. Legal and compliance requirements. Look, we get questions every day, all day about should we back up our data on premise? Yeah, of course. It's your data. And they have the customers have the mindset of, like I said at the very beginning, if it sits in the cloud, I don't have to worry about it. But if you protected your Exchange environment on premise, why aren't you protecting it in the cloud, right? And legally, pretty sure it's written in the compliance and legal departments that you have to back it up. In fact, I had a customer that is purchasing Veeam right now because they didn't realize that they had that compliance rule that if it's production data, it has to be backed up no matter where it sits, right? So it's an ongoing theme that we see. Data protection is key. Managing hybrid deployments. And we'll show you the architecture diagram. Veeam Backup from Microsoft 365 backs up a hybrid deployment. Matthew, are you guys hybrid by any chance?
Yeah, we are hybrid. We actually have, we still have some Exchange servers on-prem, which we are slowly migrating away from, just because of just the old legacy systems that we have in place, because we're not completely cloud. But yeah, absolutely, we are hybrid. We still sync AD directly to Azure. We do co-manage devices, so we are almost as hybrid as you could possibly get. Yeah,
that's awesome. I mean, I would say 10% of my customers are hybrid. The rest of them have just moved everything to Microsoft 365. I'm like, I don't want to worry about it and be done with it, right? And last but not least, Teams data structure. Veeam backs up Teams. That came out with Veeam Backup from Microsoft 365 version 5. So we've been actively developing. You'll see the development cycle in the next couple of slides, just to show you that, hey, we're just not sitting still. Hate to use this reference, but I love BlackBerry. And I was a BlackBerry user, diehard. I think it was iPhone 2. And my friend's like, hey, get an iPhone. I'm like, no, I love my BlackBerry. And you don't want to become BlackBerry, right? And Veeam is not. We're developing, we're actively listening to our customers, looking at the industry. Hence, version 7 has the SelfService Restore that a lot of customers asked for, right? As I promised, the shared responsibility model. I'm not going to dive into this much. It's out there. The top is Microsoft's responsibility. They're responsible for the core infrastructure, the networking, the availability, high availability of your data. Your data. Your responsibility, bottom. That's what you're responsible for, right? Can't say it enough. Data protection is your corporate responsibility, not Microsoft's. If you want to think of it as a colo, you have your data in a colo, right? Are you going to entrust Switch to back up your data, or like PhoenixNAP or any other colo site out there? No, the data is still yours. They're responsible for power, rack space, etc. You're just paying them for that core services, right? The data is still your responsibility. So the gap we normally had that we did mention in the previous slides about retention gaps. And this is what's really important, retention policies. Microsoft does not back up your data. They do retain some of the data, right? And most importantly, I do want to point out the last slide. Employee leaves the company, because we have a lot of turnover, especially during COVID. Like, we had a lot of turnover. If an employee leaves your company after 1 month, that mailbox is permanently deleted, right? In fact, a majority of these things are permanently deleted after 3 months, right? And the beauty of Veeam is that It's data protection. You're taking that M365 data and actually backing it up to a repository of your choice. And one thing we didn't mention, which I will mention in the next couple of slides, is the version of Veeam that's currently out right now allows you to copy your backups to a secondary location for that ultimate 3-2-1 rule of your data, having one copy offsite. Right.
Hey, Lewis, can I chime here with something real quick?
Of course.
Yeah. So I don't know if anybody's ever used Microsoft's content search functionality, but one of the nice features about having the M365 backup is when a user, say, deletes as an admin within M365, yeah, there is that retention policy that Microsoft holds for you. And if you've ever gone into the content search, you have to create a search filter based on certain criteria. You can either do it through PowerShell or you can do it through the GUI interface. And you have to create this content search. So if you're looking for a particular email, particular date, you have to put all these filters in, and then you submit it for review, essentially. And then Microsoft systems will say, based on their availability of resources, we'll create the content search for you, email you, and say, oh yeah, here's the emails that are based on that particular criteria search. And then from there, you go back into the portal. You can actually go into PowerShell and restore certain emails from attention, but that's only if they've been retained. What's nice about the M365 backup is I don't have to go through and wait for Microsoft to make up their mind and let them know that I need that email now. It could be an hour, it could be 10 minutes, it could be 6 hours. I mean, I've seen it last in the middle of a day on 2 o'clock in the afternoon when everybody's, in the US is at work. It could take hours to perform that content search. So if I have the data readily available, I just go into the M365 backup and restore it for them if they didn't do the self-service portal, essentially, and restore it. I don't have to wait for Microsoft to make up their mind, letting me know that it's ready to go. So that's another functionality of that, having it backed up, is we know we have it, and I can give it to the user whenever they need.
And you brought up a fantastic point. SLAs. There is no SLA dictated when there's a litigation hold with Microsoft. We have a lot of customers or potential customers. I have litigation hold. I can use a trash bin. Trash bin only lasts how many months? It gets deleted, inbox deleted items, permanently deleted after 1 month. But I have litigation hold. Okay, you have litigation hold. There's no SLA in terms of getting that data back, like Matthew had just mentioned, right? You could be waiting 4 hours, it could be a day, you could wait 2 days, right? It's your data, protect it, make your life easier, right? Thank you, Matthew, for the tidbits there. I mean, it helps a lot to understand from a customer perspective what you've gone through and what it can help the people, the 129 people. By the way, thank you, 129 people. That's amazing for joining. And we thank you very much for sitting in on this. But I did mention, innovation of Veeam. That's the bread and butter of Veeam, is that if you ever look at us as the magic quadrant, we've always been the top right. But it's not important just to be in the top right. It's to be top dog, where you're actually able to innovate and execute on that innovation. Anyone can be sitting on the top right quadrant, but if you're not innovating and executing on that innovation or the vision, then you're a pipe dream, right? Veeam is not. As you can see, Veeam backup for Microsoft 365 version 1 came out in 2016. We came out with version 1.5, version 2, version 3, version 4, version 5, version 6. We've developed, and I think the biggest stepping stone was version 4 for us to be able to write direct to object. And that brought us to the forefront of, hey, it's truly software as a service, keeping your data in the cloud for data protection, right? Enough about innovation. Let's talk about the product itself, right? So how do you deploy Veeam? What does it look like? And where can you put this data, right? So at the end of the day, your Microsoft 365 data sitting on top. You can have that on-premise infrastructure sitting on the bottom, that Veeam server sitting in the middle. Well, if you're backing up directly to Azure, deploy that in the Azure Marketplace. But if you're deploying in AWS S3, deploy it in AWS as an EC2 instance. Like Matthew at California Dairy, he has his Veeam backup from Microsoft 365 server sitting locally, and then pushing that data to Wasabi, right? Once again, software only, storage agnostic, you can back it up to object storage, on-prem local storage, as well as on-premise object storage, right? And Matthew, I'm sure you've seen many iterations of this slide. The flexibility says key. It says a lot about Veeam. You're not tied down. There's no storage appliance. It provides that flexibility, right?
Absolutely does. And what's nice about it is you can actually, with the new version, a lot of this is, it's taken care of in the software. You spin up the VM, you basically just say, here's what I want to use, whether it be Azure, AWS, on-prem, point it to the resource that it is, and a lot of it is taken care of. A lot of those steps that we used to do in different versions are automatically taken care of within the software. So it's extremely flexible. Absolutely is.
And you did speak about versioning. You did speak about being able to write it to anywhere you want, right? And with version 7, we've touched heavily on the self-service portal restore. What we did not speak about, which is ultra important as well, is a copy of your backups to long-term object storage. That's new to version 6. It's out, GA for the past year. You can move your monthly backups or your older backups to long-term object storage. Amazon S3 Glacier, Glacier Deep Archive, as well as Azure Archive as a backup copy. Don't have to keep everything on hot, right? And with that said, what's the use case of backing up? Is to restore. And, my favorite part about Veeam, and I worked for a law firm back in downtown LA before I joined Veeam, and the bread and butter of Veeam is Veeam Explorer. It is our proprietary application. It's how we recover application-aware items, like Veeam Backup from Microsoft.
It's really nice.
It is cool. We'll get into a quick demo of it at the very end to show you what it looks like, right? It's proprietary. We built it. It's in-house for us by us many, many moons ago. It's used across all of our platforms for application-aware recovery, right? It's not something we purchased third parties, slapped our name on it, and get third-party support from another vendor. This is our bread and butter, right? So I stress that a lot. Us Veemers, we stress that a lot. Our customers, like California Dairy, loves it mainly because it's that good. It's that much fun, right?
It's amazing when you install the product first. All of a sudden, you have 5 new icons on your desktop, and you're like, I thought I just installed one product. And there's all these different explorers you have. And you're like, what are these? And you start playing with them, like, oh, this is kind of fun. And you can see all of your data. It's extremely accessible.
And we'll go through those explorers so you can have a sneak peek for yourself, right? And you get a better understanding of the flexibility and ease of use of Veeam, which our customers love. Can't say more about that. I'm going to fly through these next 4 slides. We've talked a lot about it. Self-service restore, why you want to do it, automating, time savings, enhanced security with MFA. That came out about 2 years ago, MFA. When you're doing a restore, you have MFA so that you don't have a malicious person trying to restore something that they're not supposed to have access to, right? Once again, why self-service restore? Don't need access to the backup server to do a restore. You don't have to log on RDP to the server to do a restore. Web interface, be done with it, right? Once again, the backup copy, the last part, master the 3-2-1 rule. And this is not Veeam's rule. Veeam pushes it heavily, mainly because we're interested in educating our customers about true data protection. And across all our platforms, we will say 3-2-1 rule, right? And the 3-2-1 rule is 3 copies of your production data. Always 3 copies of production data, all right? On 2 types of media. Now that shifts a little bit. 2 types of media before is always, hey, spinning disk and tape. Cloud can take a factor of that, right? And the 1 rule is 1 copy off-site. So with version 6 having that backup copy, you can have a backup copy off-site to a different vendor, right? That way you're not keeping everything holistically within that one particular vendor.
And what's nice about having that 1 backup copy off-site is we just went through this, our cybersecurity insurance renewal. And one of the features that they request is, where's your data when it's not on-prem? Mm-hmm. And we're obviously California Dairies. And so a lot of the insurance companies say, okay, it's within California, but it needs to be out of state for geographic location changes, earthquake changes. They want to protect that data. So and knowing that it's in the cloud or it's in Wasabi or out of state makes a huge difference. That's that for cybersecurity insurance. We just tell them, here's where it's stored. Oh, it is? Great. Check. Done. Moving on. It's a nice feature.
And that's one of the reasons why we actually developed it was we've been seeing this throughout the industry about ransomware and ransomware insurance, right? And you need that checkbox, and you guys have checked that off, right? Making sure that you have that one copy off site that's not on the same type of media, as well as not in the same vendor. So I'm really happy you brought that up, because that we see that more and more in the industry about insurance, right? Insurance checkboxes, and if you don't have those checkboxes, you invalidate your insurance, and therefore you're no longer covered. Have that talk with your compliance team. Have that talk with Veeam. Have that talk with your partner within the channel, right? We'll be more than happy to have that discussion with you on how we can actually facilitate that checkbox and help protect that data that's further in the future for you guys. And also, why the backup copy? Look, you don't want it sitting on a hot tier. Let's move it to low-cost object storage, right? And archive. Realistically, the likelihood of you ever touching anything that deep, that far back into the past, is minimal. It's there for compliance reasons. It's there for the insurance checkbox, but it's also there if you actually need it, right? So hence, low-cost object storage, backup copy to it, save yourself some money, right? And before we go to the demo, how do you get started, right? So you have options. So first off, download the software, right? If you're going to write to S3 compatible storage, like Matthew at California Dairy is, to Wasabi, download it on your VM, deploy it, you'll be good to go. You can also go to the marketplaces within Azure, AWS, as well as IBM Cloud. We're readily available there, right? You just go to the marketplace, search for Veeam Backup for M365. Sorry, I just did a Veeam Backup for AWS webinar yesterday. I still have that in my head. But yeah, you're able to auto deploy from there. You pick what size VM you need, what resources they are. Once it deploys, guess what? Veeam Backup from Microsoft 365 is already installed on that VM that stood up in any of the clouds. And all you're doing is connecting your organization, attaching a repository, bam, create your first job, and you're backing up to your repository, right? You've in light deployed a data protection with Veeam within the public clouds. Cool. So with that said, I'm actually going to start the demo. They always say live demos, you never know what's going to happen. Fingers crossed. Give me 1 second, guys. And let me know if you guys can see my screen. Matthew, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Sweet.
Well, I should say I can see it.
I'll take that as a yes. That'd be good.
We can all see it, Lewis.
Thank you very much. I always want some validation. You never know. So what are we looking at here, right? I'm looking at Veeam Backup from Microsoft 365. And for you customers that are already Veeam Backup Replication customers, this looks just like Veeam Backup Replication, right? You have your command and control center down here. You have your pizza boxes up here for configuration. But let's talk about the ease of use, right? It's a VM, software only, storage agnostic. I'm going to connect my organization. Let's connect the organization. 1 second here, organization. It's edit the organization. You'll see how easy it is. So we're going to name the organization. This is the job itself. Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. I'm at the wrong view here because I clicked off of it. So you have the organization. So we have Office 365 Suite, as well as on-premise Exchange, because Veeam Backup from Microsoft 365 can actually back up to your Exchange server can back up utilizing Veeam Backup from Microsoft 365. And then you have your backup infrastructure. Your backup proxies does the data movers, very similar to Veeam Backup Replications. There's some different restrictions, but it's a data mover at the end of the day. You add your backup repositories. So we have Glacier, AWS, multitude, whatever is object storage we can write to. And then we go back to home here, organizations, and then we can actually start looking at a backup job, right? So let's take a look at a backup job. Let's take a look at existing backup job. We're going to name the backup job itself. So you have the couple options here. And this goes into a licensing question. How we license, is it expensive? So we license very similar to what Microsoft does. We license based off of users. Now, with that one license type, you're able to back up Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams. We're not capacity based. So like Matthew's doing, they're utilizing OneDrive, right? Let's just say you have a OneDrive user that has like 3 terabytes of data. We don't care if it's 3 terabytes or 300 megs. It's still the same one license type based off the user, right? And initially, a lot of customers want to just back up a subset, whether it's C-level or managers or a particular office or headquarters only. Some customers want to back up the entire organization, right? In this case, you can do that. So we back up the entire organization. And in this case, you can actually exclude objects as well. So let's say you want the entire organization, but you don't want like, IT. So you can exclude IT from here, right? And then you select the backup proxy, the repository, and then schedule the job. You've just configured your first backup job. Like I said, you're backing up. What's the use case of backing up if you can't restore? Well, with Veeam, we definitely can restore. And we were talking about this earlier about the Veeam Explorers. We definitely have the flexibility and to choose what type of restore you want to use. So Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams, right? So let's take a look at Exchange Restore. We did a backup last night. Let's take a look at that particular backup. Splash screen, Veeam Explorer. Once again, utilized across entire platform for application recovery. So I'm a huge fanboy. I work at Veeam, and I love this functionality of the GUI. Why? And you'll see in a second, and Game of Thrones fans in our demo lab, this looks just like Outlook. Everything you see here, we're backing up. Archive, calendar, contact, conversation history, deleted items, drafts, inbox. Everything you see here looks just like Outlook, right? But let's just say, this mailbox got encrypted with ransomware. You can't restore this from Microsoft. The only way you can restore it is from a data protection software like Veeam. Restore it directly back to Office 365 or Microsoft 365 now, right? So we do high-level restores of large mailboxes. Cool part here is you can actually export it as a PST for litigation hold. So you can export as a PST to your desktop, hand it off to legal. It's on litigation hold internally off Microsoft. Go ahead, Matthew.
And just to give some reference, what we use this function for is, let's say an individual leaves the company and they want to take their contacts with them. Well, usually the account is disabled. You can come in here and just export their contacts to a PST, and whatever your policy or process is either send it to them in a PST or even attach it to your Outlook and then create a CSV file for them. There's a lot of functionality built into this, and we use this routinely just for getting little things out of mailboxes.
And that's true, right? It's been around for ages, and it does the big things like this, as well as granular recovery. And granular recovery is looking at individual mail items, right-clicking and restoring those mail items directly back to Microsoft 365. There's a slide of 45 ways to do a restore within Veeam. It realistically is 45 ways because you have multiple ways to actually protect your data as well as restore the data to its original location, somewhere else, even compare item properties, which is really cool. But what I do want to show you with this limited time we have left is advanced find. E-discovery. You can do multiple search criteria based off of specific categories, specific fields, a condition, and the value. And once you have all that criteria configured here, you start the process. And let's just say we start the process. And you can highlight all, right-click, PST, send it off to legal. Your litigation e-discovery has been completed. All right. I just wanted to give you a quick view of Veeam Explorer. Like I said, Veeam Explorer is our own bread and butter built in-house for Veeam by Veeam. I say that fast. I say that a lot, man, because it's very important to myself when I was a customer that I don't have to wait for support from another support from a different vendor to restore something that I need right now, right? You'll hear all of us stress that at Veeam, the importance of it's your data. You should have access to it, right? So with that said, I'm gonna, stop sharing my screen for a bit. And then Scott, do we have any questions for either myself or Matthew?
Yeah, we certainly do. We've got questions for both of you guys. So, Lewis, the first one is probably for you. It comes from Patrick, who's wondering, do we have to bring our own storage? Do we have to find a place to store the backups? So I know you addressed that a little bit, but wonder if you can go into some more detail on that for Patrick.
Yeah, so Veeam's vision is software only storage agnostic. And yes, you do need to provide your own storage. For Veeam Backup from Microsoft 365, it's either block storage on premise or object storage on premise, or you can actually store this data in object in the cloud. And why it's really cool about storing this stuff in the cloud versus bringing this data back on premise is scalability, right? Let's just say your company has ingested another company. And you start backing this data up and you're like, oh, I ran out of space locally. What do I do? Well, you have to expand more storage. If it's sitting in Wasabi, you never have to worry about that. Granted, you do have a contract, you do have a bill consumption ratios, but you're not plugging in another device. You're not adding more disks. That's the beauty of being software only storage agnostic, right? And you can write to anywhere. Hopefully I was able to answer your question. But yes, you do need to bring your own storage as we are software only. And by you bringing your own storage, you can look locally for any ROI, return of investments. If you have a SAN that you just decommissioned, repurpose that for block storage for Veeam to write to, right? Or you decide to move to a different vendor, you could do that as well, moving from like HP to NetApp, NetApp to Cisco, Cisco to Dell. You have that full flexibility to do that.
Okay, super. Hey, this next question is for Matthew. This comes from John, who's wondering, how did California Dairy segment or prioritize backup restore policies? And then there's sort of a follow-up question probably for Lewis, but let me turn that one over to Matthew first.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, John, for the question. We prioritize, so we have two different environments. We have basically our Veeam backup and replication, which handles all of our on-prem VMs, has the agents back up the VMs in the Azure. And then if we have Microsoft 365, completely separate as well. So those two environments back up completely independent of each other. So I'm not sure which one you're referring to, but for Microsoft 365, we have two separate jobs set up. Instead of having one job that backs up everything for the entire organization, we have set up a job that backs up just Exchange and just email, or excuse me, Office 365 email. And then we have a separate job that is absolutely just created for OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams. And Veeam defaults them by prioritizing them in the order you just create them in. And you can change the order however you want. But we set them on the initial seed for the data is obviously going to vary based on how much data you're backing up. So for us, it took almost 5 days to back up the data. But once the data is up there, the incremental backups are hours. And we back up probably ballpark every day, about 2 terabytes of incremental data. It takes about 2 to 3 hours to back it up. So we have it scheduled backup every 8 hours for our OneDrive and SharePoint. And so we prioritize the Exchange first, which backs up on a daily basis. And then our OneDrive and SharePoint backs up about every 8 hours. And that's in the schedule. Last slide, you'll see it. Instead of triggering on a single day, you trigger it on an every 8-hour basis with windows accordingly.
Okay. Great. That makes a lot
I
of
hope
sense.
that answered your question.
Yeah, and Lewis, so John was also asking, are there recommended best practices by Veeam about prioritizing backup and restore policies?
I get that question a lot. And I always hesitate. You always hear me hesitate this because when it comes to best practices, there is no best practices that we dictate upon our customers except for architecture and design, right? Mainly because best practices span what we sell into or we provide our customers data protection for is small business to enterprise to large global scale enterprises. And each dictates their own best practices. Even within industry, finance, legal, healthcare has their own compliance. So I would say if you're looking for a standardized data protection methodology, look internally within your compliance team, see what they dictate. And it goes back to the insurance as well. Your insurance may dictate they need X, Y, and Z, right? To make sure that you can actually restore based off of your RTPOs, right? So I would say, look, it depends on what your industry is. If you want some standards, reach out to your local SC. We'll help provide what other customers are doing. That's normally what I do, based off of what industry you're in and what's, if you're SMB, enterprise, large scale, global enterprises, we'll provide what other customers are doing. And then you can guide your compliance based off of what other leaders in the industry are doing with Veeam.
Okay. All right, great. This next question comes from Gary, and I think I'll direct it to you first, Lewis, just for sort of a broad answer, and then Matthew, I'd love to hear how you guys are handling this too. But the question is, what are some pitfalls on the self-service feature? I know some people wouldn't want to give that control to users. Are there any tips on implementing that?
So implementation's fairly simple. And myself as a storage engineer for 15 plus years on the customer side, majority of that, I wear multiple hats as backup engineer as well. Your mileage will vary. And, Matthew's using it to the fullest extent possible at California Dairy. However, when my customers ask me, should I deploy it? And I would say, it depends how much you trust your end users, right? It's similar to the ransomware discussion or security question. Is your biggest hole in your security is always your end users, mainly because you have to educate them. I'm still going through education on a weekly basis in terms of, hey, is this spam? And we have to check it off with spam. Do you want to give your end user the power to restore? And that's what it comes down to, mainly because it can be a great thing and it could be a bad thing in case if they overwrite or do something they shouldn't do to restore the data back to production, right? So it's a fine line. If I say if you're going to roll it out with education, roll it out slowly. And once again, your miles will vary depending on who your end users are.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Matthew, I saw you smiling. It looked like you had something to say about that. So I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not an all or one blanket kind of enable it or disable it. So you can granularly push this out. Say you want your quality department to only have the ability to restore their particular files. You can do that on a group role basis. If you don't want your first line workers to have access to this, they don't need to have access to it. You just don't give them access to it. You don't have to do a blanket enable. Given in the interface, it's literally a checkbox to enable it, enable your certificate, and bam, it does its own thing for you, and you have access to the portal. But you have the granular ability to push this out on a level by level, group by group, department by department basis, based on whatever you're looking for as in IT. I mean, you're right. You don't want a user to be able to restore production data that everybody has access to it. And if they have access to it, then that's one of those things you have to determine, is this what you want them? And it is nice to have, but you're right. I think Gary for asking the question, you want to make sure that you push this out on a very methodical method because you don't want that to happen.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Well, we're just about up on time. Lewis, thanks for the overview of Veeam and all the detail. And Matthew, thank you for that, the day-to-day perspective and some of your philosophy and reasons for implementing. And this has just been a fantastic conversation. So really appreciate both of you coming on and talking with us.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Matthew.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being a great customer.
Appreciate Scott for facilitating this. Lewis, pleasure as always. Obviously, if anybody has any questions, they're welcome to reach out to myself at all. I mean, I'll be happy to answer questions.
Same here.
All right, great. Okay, well, thanks again to Matthew and to Lewis. And with that, just one quick reminder that there are some resources there in the handouts. But we do have one more piece of business, and that is the $300 Amazon prize drawing. So thank you to everybody for attending. And the winner of the $300 prize is Miroslav Avdiyuk from California. So congratulations to Miroslav. We'll be in touch to get you your card. But with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Veeam for making this event possible, and Matthew also for participating and bringing all his perspective. And so thanks as always for attending, everybody, and for your great questions. And that concludes today's event. Have a great rest of your day.